There we go. Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'll do that and that. Awesome. All right. So welcome everyone. Where we're going to be diving into the work today, or the book today, is on page 60. And where we ended up, because somebody is not great at time management, that's me, we were just reading step 12. And one of the things that I'll point out, because as we're going through the reading, how it works, we're seeking a new experience. We're trying to see this reading that is read at almost every single meeting that we go to in a brand new way. And there were a couple ways that we were doing that. One of the ways that we were doing that is breaking it down, going slowly. And so for those that weren't here last week, you're like, girl, you didn't make it very far. Yes, yes. And the other ways in which we are breaking it down is we're comparing what was written and what is written to what was written in the original manuscript. And just an important or an interesting difference between what was written in the original manuscript and what's written on page 60 today is in the original manuscript, for step 12, it said, having had a spiritual experience as the result of this course of action, we tried to carry this message to others, especially alcoholics, and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And I think it's interesting, those differences. Also, one of the differences I will point out is in the original manuscript, it says spiritual experience, and on page 60 today, it says spiritual awakening. Now, if you take the view that a spiritual experience happens very suddenly and a spiritual awakening more slowly, amazing, you're right. But for me, I like to take them as synonyms. Synonyms instead of synonyms, but a synonym is a word that means the same thing, that we're pointing to the same thing. And that was just something that was brought to my attention that I wanted to point out. And so now as we get into kind of the first full paragraph, that's not a step on page 60, we'll have a look at some of what there's a group in Alcoholics Anonymous known as YPAW. And it's Young People of AA. It's for the young and young at heart. And what they do is they put on a bunch of conventions as a way to create service and unity and fellowship. And when they read how it works, they have a bunch of call-outs. You know, people will yell. And like as they read the steps, the crowd will go, 7, 7. And then when they get to 7, they cheer. And I think that's a reference to the show Friends. But just to point out some of the silly little things they do. But part of why I'm making reference to that is because these call-outs help us to see something that we don't quite hear all the time. So many of us exclaimed, "What an order! I can't go through with it." To exclaim is to yell. There's an exclamation mark, exclaim, "What an order! I can't go through with it." And I want to point out, many of us, let's be honest, most of us, none of us were like, oh, I just can't wait to do those, right? We're talking about these 12 steps and we're reading them because that is the decision I'm making in step 3. The decision to work these 12 steps as a way of life, like my life depends on it because it does. That's the decision we're making. And we have a look at these steps and we're like, what an order! I can't do it. I can't do it. And for me, this is again the book meeting us where we're at. Now, if we were at a YPAW meeting, what the kids, it's for the young and young at heart. No one's turned away. But what the kids are yelling out is like, I'm so discouraged. And then the person who is reading will say, do not be discouraged. No one. So do not be discouraged. So again, the book is meeting us where we're at and going to take us where we need to go. Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. And again, I take a little bit of a controversial hot take, not super controversial because I'm not going to argue it or you know what I mean? But for me, the principles are the actions of the 12 steps. So no one among us has been able to perfectly adhere to the tangible, practical actions of the 12 steps. Not you guys, but I know that there are some alcoholics out there who have a time or two, by chance, not done their evening review. I know, it's shocking, but they do exist. And there are some alcoholics who don't make all their amends. And they're like, please stop mentioning that, Paige. Ooh, but it has been known to happen. And I know nobody here at this meeting could relate to or anything like that. And what I love is in WIPA, what was then yelled out is like, but we're saints, to be followed with, we are not saints. We are not saints. Because a lot of times when we're approaching these 12 steps in the spiritual way of life, what we think that is being asked of us is to be perfect, is to be infallible. We are not saints. But one of the things I will point out, it is Thomas Merton. And I'm not gonna quote him. I'm gonna loosely paraphrase because I have a brain that doesn't always hold information accurately. So Father Thomas Merton, who, if you have, one of the AA apps has a prayer that's attributed to him, the Thomas Merton prayer, which is a beautiful, lovely prayer, especially as it pertains to making the decision to work these 12 steps as a way of life. But he had one of the best definitions of sainthood that I sort of heard. And the definition of sainthood is to be who we truly are and to be who God has called us to be. That's it. That's it. And it's like, oh, maybe we could aspire to sainthood. You know what I mean? And actually, I'm not going to grab it for you. But I'll tell you this story. I'm much better today, but there was a time in my life where I was not at all comfortable accepting or receiving any sort of compliments. And I would become a ninja and just like dodge them and avoid, like it's spiritual dodgeball. Like, Paige, you did such a good job. Ugh, avoided that. And people would say like, oh, Paige, you're so kind or whatever. And I don't do this anymore, but I used to. I used to be like, put me on a dollar store candle, as a bit of a sarcastic response, because at the dollar store they have those candles with the saints on them. Well, I have a sponsee who actually put my face on one of those dollar store candles. I have it over there. I'll get it after. And I didn't buy it for myself, but I will tell you the best part of that story is after she ordered it, the company that made it called her and was like, I am so sorry. We put the candle out to be shipped, but somebody stole it. And what that means is there is just a candle with my face on it out in the world. And somebody was joking like, ooh, I hope it was an alcoholic that stole it. And they're just getting these vibes from the candle. Read the big book. Ooh, And so that's sort of the like humorous way that I approach. We are not saints. But I will tell you, there was a time when I was in meditation and it was actually a serious thing that came. So I was having my little ADHD thoughts bouncing around and I was thinking about we are not saints. But then a very serious thought that was maybe not my thought came over me. And the thought was, I don't want to be a saint. I want to live my life in such a way where the people that I get to work with, the people that I spend time with, I get to help them be saints. That's how I want to live my life. And again, the sainthood is, you don't have to be pious. The sainthood is who you truly always wanted to be and who God has called you to be. That's what I mean. And if you have spent any time with varieties of religious experience, they got some chapters on saints, which is like wild. So that's my little varieties of religious experience shout out. So we are not saints. And then at YPAW, all the kids will go, what's the point? Like, if we're not saints, what's the point? Which, anyone relate to that? I'm not you guys, but a time or two, alcoholics have been known to have a little black and white, all or nothing thinking. Not you guys. You're super go with the flow. So the point is, we are willing to grow along spiritual lines, and growth is the name of the game, to grow. This is not a program of complacency or stagnation in my experience. When I have become complacent, when I have become stagnant, I have gotten unwell and done so quite quickly. This is a program of growth. So grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. Now, this is just an interesting thing that comes from my university experience. And again, I was 40 grand that I had to pay back on student loans, and I don't want to use my degree. So when there's a fun fact from school, you guys get it, whether you want it or not. Now, I'm good on consent. You guys don't have to listen if you don't want the fun fact. Originally, the word progress did not even mean to move in a forward motion. Originally, the word progress just meant to move. But for our case, the principles, again, for me, welcome, we're on page 60. For me, the principles are the actions. They're guides to progress. I need to progress along with the actions of the 12 steps. Now it says we claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. And this is one of the few hills that I die upon. I know I am pedantic at times, but this is one where I am pedantic with purpose. And I have that on a t-shirt. But when we're talking about this, a lot of times in the rooms we'll say, progress, not perfection. And I don't go out of the way to correct anyone because that is rude. Like, I'm not going to be like, actually, it says spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. But what actually, right? But I do want to point that out with us, because a lot of times I can confuse progress with spiritual progress. And so how often have maybe we or our sponsees or the newcomers that we're working with and trying to help begin to progress, right? There's a natural progress that will happen if I put down the drink. I'll get a job. My family will start forgiving me, possibly. We get some of these things. We get a job, we get a vehicle, we get a relationship, we get some of the things back in our life. And to the world outside of Alcoholics Anonymous, to those who do not understand alcoholics, oh girl, you're making progress. You're going back to school. You're doing all these things. That is progress. But what do we know experientially as alcoholics? None of that can keep me sober. I can't stay sober on the relationship. I can't stay sober on the bank account. I can't stay sober on the job or the promotion or moving to a nice place or the kids or the car or I promise you I cannot stay sober on the relationship, let me tell you. But I can't stay sober on any of those. And so one of the few places with which I am pedantic, it is spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. How am I progressing spiritually? How am I progressing along these 12 steps? That's what matters. And that's what matters whether I'm brand new, 1 day sober, whether I'm 10 years sober, 20 years sober, 5 years sober. How am I growing spiritually? That is what matters. So we claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. And I want to talk about the word perfection for a moment. A lot of Alcoholics Anonymous, the ideas that later became the 12 steps originated from the Oxford group. And the Oxford group was big on the 4 absolutes. And the 4 absolutes weren't ever, from my understanding, meant as like, girl, if you're not absolutely honest, you ain't nothing. That's not how they were doing it back in the Oxford group. They were ideals that people were striving towards. But you'll see that this is a departure. We're saying, hey, we're not trying to be perfect. We're just trying to grow spiritually more and more each day. But the word perfection, in many religious connotations, so if you're like, girl, I am not here for religious connotations, don't worry about it. But if we could just be open for a second, the word perfection in a religious connotation is to be in a state without sin. And it's like, girl, you use that word. Hold on. We spoke about that word back in Bill's story. And when we see that word, if we're growing in step 11 and seeking, and we see that word and it carries baggage, of course it does. We can throw out the word sin and we think defective character. We think shortcoming. That's what we're talking about. And really, it is anything that is blocking me. Actually, one of the best definitions I ever heard of like what sin is, I got from an Oxford group book. Again, because I am fun at parties. It was VC Kitchens. I was a pagan. And in it, he described sin as anything that blocks me from you and blocks me from God. That's it. And that's what a defect is. Anything that is standing in the way of me connecting with you or connecting with God. And so that's to be in a state, basically, we claim spiritual progress. We're saying, hey, we're trying to grow along these 12 steps rather than I'm defect free, baby. I got no defects. I'm radiating humility. I bring humility up as a topic at the meeting, but there's not enough people here, Some of you guys get that, yeah. But again, if you hear the word sin and it still conveys a message that I don't like. The word sin also comes from archery, and it is used when one misses the mark and doesn't hit the bullseye. So we can look at that. Because again, the book Alcoholics Anonymous, the program Alcoholics Anonymous, and the God that I have experienced in Alcoholics Anonymous does not expect perfection from me. I don't get good to get God. I get honest about where I'm at, and I take a series of surrendered actions, and God meets me where I'm at and takes me where I need to go. And we see that again and again and again in this book. So it says, our description of the alcoholic, and we described the alcoholic very heavily in More About Alcoholism, but we described the alcoholic and there is a solution, the doctor's opinion, and even in Bill's story we were pointing to the description of the alcoholic. It says the chapter to the agnostic, so we agnostics laying down the foundation for step 2, and our personal adventures. Oh boy, was I on some adventures, let me tell you. Behind the dumpster, you can almost hear the Indiana Jones theme song. Just that. I know that's not the theme song. I had it in my head. It didn't come out of my mouth. But we on some adventures. They were deplorable. But our personal adventures, which is our experience. I get to hold up my experience to the light of this book. Not just with my drinking, but those of us who are working these 12 steps, those of us who have recovered, we get to hold up the light of our experience to things like the promises. So it says, personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. This is a step 1 proposition. Step 1, that I am an alcoholic and cannot manage my own life. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. Now, I'm going to say something that I typically forget might be controversial. It's not super controversial. I'm not going to die on this hill. But I actually believe that is a step 1 proposition as well. That a human power is not sufficient. Because if I'm truly powerless over this thing, human power is not enough. And we were smashing that home again and again and again. And if you're like, girl, I disagree with you, that's fine. You're right. I'm wrong. I am having fun. So come and join me being wrong. But this idea that no human power could have relieved our alcoholism, we can look at the human powers we tried to stay sober. And I want you to know there is nothing wrong with the human powers that I'm going to mention. Well, some of them might be a little sketchy, but there's nothing wrong with them. They just don't work for me. Doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, treatment centers, counselors, detoxes, sober living, getting into it. Here's where we start getting a little sketchy. Getting into a relationship, he might not be Mr. Right, but he's Mr. Right now. And sometimes he's Mr. Right out of jail. I mean, some of you guys had a better picker than I did. It's fine. It's fine. But getting in the relationship, getting out of the relationship, having a family, having children, right? All of getting a good job. All of that is human power. And I need to get to that place where human power could not be sufficient. It could not recover. It could not relieve me of my alcoholism. So that is a step 1 proposition. And I believe letter not number, is C, that God could and would if he were sought. And that is a step 2 idea, that God can and God will. relieve me of my alcoholism. I just got to believe that there could be a power in step 2, and that power could relieve me of the mental obsession. That's all that is asked of me to believe in step 2. And when it says, if he were sought, that is all that is asked of me, to seek. To seek. And that is how I grow spiritually. That is how I progress. I progress in the seeking. And how do I seek God? Of course with prayer, of course with meditation, but working these 12 steps as a way of life, like my life depends on it, because it does. That is how I seek spiritually. So if these 3 pertinent ideas are sufficient, we're ready to move on. Now, at my home group, it's tonight at 10 o'clock Eastern. It's hybrid if anyone wants to come. But I know it is really late for a lot of you, especially the early birds. I'm not up then. But we read the original manuscript of how it works. We read the original manuscript version because it's a little different and it's far more direct. It's more you. And it just sort of shakes things up, especially with a reading that has so much information, but we often don't hear because we've heard it again and again and again. Now, in the original manuscript, we don't read this next part that I'm going to reference because that would be a little bit much. But in the original manuscript, there was, after the 3 pertinent ideas, it says, if you are not convinced of these things, you ought to reread the book up until this point or throw it away. Which, part of me is like, ooh, was that Bill's scheme so that they would throw it away and then have to buy another one? When that didn't work? Yeah. But they took that out because that's a little too hostile. So they softened it. But if I am convinced of these things, it then says, being convinced, we are at step 3. And now is when we begin to look at that idea of, am I open to seeking this power? Am I open to working these 12 steps as a way of life? It says, which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to God as we understood him. So the 3rd step is simply a decision. It is a decision. And the metaphor that I often use is, and I want to point out, it is a metaphor, although if you saw my temperature that we've been having lately, you'd be like, girl, step 1 is essentially, if I stay in Calgary, Alberta, that's where I live. If I stay in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, I'm going to continue to drink and I'm going to continue to die. I will relapse. That's step 1. Step 2 is just believing that South Carolina exists. That's it. I just gotta believe it exists. Now, it'd be really rude of me to show up to this meeting and just try to gaslight Vivian. South Carolina, no. What? That's not a thing. No. I know South Carolina really works for you. I just don't believe in it. She'd be like, girl, that's rude. I live here. So all I need to believe is that the state of South Carolina exists. I don't need to know anything about South Carolina. I don't need to have an opinion about South Carolina. Sounds lovely. I'll come. I'm always down for an invite. Yeah. But I don't need to understand it, define it, comprehend it. I just need to believe it exists. And in the 3rd step, what I am going to do, and I'm going to do this right now, is I'm going to decide to come to South Carolina. That's it. I'm coming. Have you saw the weather? You guys got 40. Actually, we're going to be 40 tomorrow. I'm wondering why I have a headache setting in. From 3 degrees to 40 degrees overnight. That's what's happening. But I'm making a decision. I'm coming. I'm coming to South Carolina. I'm still here. I'm still here. So that decision does not get me to South Carolina. What do I got to do? I got to get my passport. I'm pointing at it because I know where it is. 2 things. I have one, gift of recovery. 2, I know where it is. That's the grace of God. But it's right there. I know where it is. I got to get my passport. I got to buy a ticket. I then got to get to the airport. I got to get through security. I don't have to take off my shoes, but they pat me down. I got to get through security. I got to get to my gate. I'm going to assume maybe I could get a direct flight. If not, I got to fly to Toronto and then get to transfer to South Carolina. And then only when I land am I there. And so if I make the decision to go to South Carolina, but I don't take any action, I really haven't made that decision, have I? And also, if I get my passport and buy a ticket, but I don't get to the airport, I haven't really made that decision, have I? If I go all the way to my gate, but I don't get on the plane, have I really made that decision to go to South Carolina? And it's just like that with these 12 steps. The third step is simply, I don't say just because it's a big one. It is simply a decision. And it is a decision to work these 12 steps as a way of life like my life depends on it. Because my will and my life does not get turned over in step 3. My will and my life gets turned over as I work these 12 steps. That is how my will and my life get turned over. And I have a lot of times people will share about our will is our thoughts and our life is our actions. But sometimes when something gets said again and again and again, I like to just see it in a new way. And it was a sponsee of mine. He was sharing this idea that, like, what if my will is my actions and my life is the results? And that's what I'm turning over to this power, God as we understood him. Now, I'll point out in step 3, it talks about care of God. And I know I spoke about this last week, but I think it's really important. When I'm at the third step, I'm at the precipice, the edge of a cliff, and I am terrified. Nobody is excited to write inventory because we're terrified of step 5. I'm afraid that I'm going to share with you my deep, dark secret, and you're going to reject me and tell me how awful and broken that I already feel that I am. And I'm terrified of amends because I'm, again, afraid that I'm going to show up and I'm going to be broken. I'm going to feel broken and rejected. That's what's driving that. And so I'm afraid, and I don't know what's going to happen. But I am making this decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. And I always want to emphasize care. My will and my life will be cared for. I know that to be true. Because every time in this book I read a promise, deeper than that, every time I experience in my life a promise as it is laid out in this book, that becomes irrefutable evidence of God's care. My will and my life has been cared for. I don't know if it will be in step 3. It's a leap of faith. But my experience as we work these steps is that it is. And when it says God as we understood him, because I'm so fun and I'm just casually hanging out reading, not even reading, I get the computer to read it to me, Oxford group books, and like I got a 1930s dictionary. Did I purchase it? No, I just had one around the house because that's how fun I am. My 1930s dictionary, I looked up the word understand. And in my dictionary, it says to understand is to know through experience. And at the third step, I probably don't have much of an understanding of this power because I don't have experience with this power. But what I am doing through these 12 steps is building that relationship and building an experience. And as the result of this course of action, I will have an experience. So it says, and again, the book is just meeting us where we're at because it says being convinced we're at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to God as we understood him. What's our immediate question? What do you mean by that? What do you want me to do? It's like, okay, just what do we mean by that? And just what do we do? And again, these 12 steps are not, here's what we think you need to do. Here are the actions that we took. We're all shoulder to shoulder upon this common journey. So it says the first requirement. Oh man, there's a requirement? Like, I thought there was no requirements. Tradition 3, the long form, all that is required for me to be a member is a desire and a problem with alcohol. That's the only thing that is required. But the requirements for sobriety are often a lot more than the requirements for membership. So the first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. So I need to be convinced. Absolutely. This is what the first 80, you got it, did. And the more of us who do this work, the more of us, even though we're not a part of the 80, the more of us who have had these experiences, the more of us are evidence of what's written in this book. So the first thing that is asked of me, I need to be convinced that me running any life cannot be successful. Me running the show does not work. Now, there's a couple ways to look at any life. And the first is how I read it for a long time. Is, any human being is not going to have a fun time if they are living their life on self-will, alcoholic or not. And that's absolutely fair enough. But there's another way to look at any life. And I feel like it was Bill Swan that told me this, because he always wants credit. Fair enough when he points things out. And I can't remember if it was him or not. If it wasn't him, just give him credit anyways. I love the guy. He's great. I give credit. But what I want to point out is that any life, well, all of us here have many lives. You have your family life. You maybe have your work life. Gosh, we got a relationship life, a sex life. I don't know about you guys. It took me some work to realize I had a thought life. Any life, the life that we have, our life on the road, driving life. Not calling anyone out. She's driving safe. She's fine. But any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. How often do I come to Alcoholics Anonymous and was it from Terry? I might have been from Terry. It might have been. I don't know. I give credit where I get it. But any life. And how often do I come to Alcoholics Anonymous and I want to kind of have my little AA basket over here, my little AA bucket over here. And that'll be from, the prayer to the prayer and the meetings, and there it is. And then I want to have my family life over here, and I can't let God manage work. I'm a career, I'm clearly not, I am absolutely, but I'm a career person, and I've got ambitions, and, all these different lives. And it is not that I have an AA basket over here and all these other baskets over there. Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous are how I live all my lives. Not just from prayer to prayer, but from prayer to prayer. The prayer out from the serenity prayer to the prayer at the start of the meeting. That all areas of my life. So I've got to be convinced of this. And if you're like me, that's a big ask. I got to be, actually, to be fair, my life was a dumpster that was on fire. So it was not that big of an ask. At best I was getting smoldering, but more often than not, she was blazing and heading towards a cliff. So it says, on that basis, the basis of me trying to control and manage my life, we are almost always in collision with something or somebody, and this I love, even though our motives are good. So how do I know when I'm in self-will? Am I constantly bumping up against people? Am I finding that my life is having all this friction? Or if you're somebody like me and I am conflict avoidant, do I have a lot of internal friction from trying to avoid, dealing with things I need to deal with? I know nobody relates to any of those. It's just me. Bump it up against. And here's what I love. Even though our motives are good, because I genuinely show up to life with good motives. I genuinely don't ever intend to harm anyone. I genuinely want what's best for others. I genuinely do. And yet, even with the best motives, it is not enough. And I'm off on a tangent. It's an interesting thing. We often talk a lot about our motives in AA, but never where the book tells us to check our motives. It's usually I got to check my motives before I make the amends. Go make the amends. Just go make the amends. I got to check my motives before I sponsor this. Just sponsor them. Just go sponsor them. Just go do it. But there's a couple places where it asks that I check my motives, and we don't check them there. Before getting into a relationship, not checking there. So my best motives My desire to be helpful is not sufficient. So it says most people try to live by self-propulsion. And propulsion is that movement, self-will, to move and propel myself forward based on my will and my ideas and my plans and my need for control. It says each person is like an actor who wants to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way. If his arrangements would stay put, if only people would do as he wished, the show would be great. Everybody, including himself, would be pleased. You know what I love about that? It's like everyone would just be happy if we all did what I wanted. And I know I would also be happy, but that's just a byproduct. That's not the focus. What an unintended consequence. Me getting my way. Who would have thought? I'm just as surprised as you. And so what is this metaphor? Because it's an important metaphor. Let's imagine that we're all in a play. And imagine this play, and we're all in it. We're all a part of it. And imagine that this play is Romeo and Juliet. And some of you who did not skip high school English language arts are like, girl, that play doesn't go very well. I know, I'm here for the drama, right? And so I am a part of the play. And I've been given a role. And I want you guys to know, I think I'm Juliet. Listen, I am Juliet up in this play. I am not. I am tree number 3. And that is the important takeaway. I am tree number 3. And so imagine that we're in this play, and I'm tree number 3, and I'm trying to tell all of you guys where you need to stand, where the directions need to be, how the lighting needs to be, what the music needs to be. And I've made a decision. It's alternative polka. That's going to be the music. And I don't understand why you're not getting on board with this, you know. And so I'm trying to manage and control. And I mean, there's some times that I'm trying to shimmy my way up to center stage. Romeo! Boop, boop, boop. But there's also times where I'm like, hey, I know the ending. And I don't want it to end that way. And I'm trying to change it and control it. And to do so with good motives. And it says, life would be wonderful if we just let tree number 3 manage the thing. In trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. So I'm trying to get you to move and trying to control everyone on this stage and even the behind the scenes crew. And I'm trying to do it kindly and with good intentions and I'm trying to show up St. Paige. Oh, do what I think you need to do. Oh, right? And it says he may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest, or self-sacrificing. And then it says, on the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. And let's be real, most of us are going to start with option A. Let me show up kind, considerate, patient, all that. And if that doesn't work, then's coming out egotistical, selfish, mean, and dishonest. I'm bringing out the big guns if I don't get my way. But what am I after? I'm after my way. And actually, I was speaking with at a meeting, and I was reminded Sandy Beach. Credit where credit is due. He always had this story about, imagine I was coming up to Sandy, I'm like, listen, it's so hard. I am tree number 3. And they won't let me Juliet around the place. Don't they know I'm the star of the show? And I'm not getting my way. And Sandy would say, do you want to know how you avoid the pain and suffering of not getting your way? Yes, I absolutely want to know that. Well, the trick is, don't have a way. If I don't have a way, I won't be disappointed when I don't get my way. And so it says, but as with most humans, he is more likely to have varied traits. So what usually happens? this show doesn't come off very well. So I'm trying to get you guys to stand where I think you need to stand and say the lines that you need to say. I think you need to say. Now keep in mind, I don't got the full script. I only have my lines swaying the breeze. You know what I mean? I don't know what your lines are, but I'm telling you how you should say them, what they should be, where you should stand, and I'll be kind and nice and generous with it. Or I'll be a real jerk. I will be a diva, a drama queen, get my way. And it goes on to say, he begins to think life doesn't treat him right. And that is a symptom of me being in self-will, falling into the, what about me? And I'm going to ruin your day slightly. I'm going to ruin it a lot harder here in a little bit. But I've found in my experience, when I fall into what about me, it is a clear sign I'm in self. When I'm thinking, what about me? Oh. And there's some times where I see it. I'm like, what about me? And I'm like, oh no. Like it's happening in real time, right? So he decides to exert himself more. So I'm going to use more self, more effort, more energy. He becomes on the next occasion still more demanding or gracious. And man, there have been times where that more demanding or gracious, the gracious, I was called out on that. Because I think if I contort myself to make myself to be who I think you need to be, then you're going to act in the way I think I need you to act and treat me in the way that I think you need to treat me. Oh, and I use contorting myself because I will I imagine trying to fit into a box that I don't fit in and to be somebody that I'm not, and I'm a piece at any cost. But after a while, that price gets a little too expensive and I can't live with myself. But I'm going to exert more self and it does not work. Still, the play does not suit him. Admitting he may be somewhat at fault. Okay, maybe I have not been perfect. The perfect tree, trying to run everybody's life. But he is sure that other people are more to blame. If you would just stay on your cue. I know I overreacted, but you weren't doing what I thought you needed to do. And so this is the result. He becomes angry, indignant, self-pitying. And I fall into self. What is his basic trouble? Is he not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? Now, this is where I'm going to ruin your day. But I'm telling you ahead of time. You don't have to raise your hand and wave or anything like that, but I'll just throw it out here. If there's anyone here who would describe themselves as a people pleaser, you don't have to cop to it. You don't have to cop to it. Because I'm doing a bait and switch. So don't feel like you're caught in the spiritual judo. But when I got here, I would consider myself a people pleaser. Oh, but here's the thing. I'm not a people pleaser. Because I don't actually care whether or not you are pleased. What am I after? Whether or not you like me. I am an approval, and then a word that starts with the W that I'm not going to say. Or, if we don't want to write down inappropriate words, a self-seeker even when trying to be kind. Because my people-pleasing isn't really about helping you. It's about me and what I can get from you. That validation, that approval, that sense of worth, that's what it's about. So is he not really self-seeker even when trying to be kind? It's still about me. And how do I know? How do I know whether I'm being kind with poor motives? Who cares? Go be kind. If you have poor motives, you'll get a resentment, then you can write inventory on it. Just go be kind. Just go be kind. But truly, one of the tests is if I can give and let go of the results, and I don't care if I get my way, then I know I'm more on the beam. And it says, is he not a victim of the delusion? And I want to point out the language used, victim of the delusion. When we use victim and delusion, we have previously used it in reference to the obsession of the mind, which takes us back and again to that first drink. So we're talking about that type of delusion. So we're not talking literally about the mental obsession, but we're talking about something as insane as this. And it says that he can rest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well. And the rest, the word rest with a W, it's the root of the word wrestle. To wrest is to take by force. And doesn't it sort of intuit that I cannot drag and pull and scrape satisfaction and happiness through managing? You know, that's not how we get there. And maybe it's not intuitive. Maybe you're like, girl, this is news to me. And so what do I need to do? I need to stop wrestling. And I need to drop the W as if we were playing like Hangman or something. I need to drop the W and rest with an R. So instead of trying to paddle upstream in this impossible river of force, what I need to do is I need to let go and truly go with the flow. Like a spiritual lazy river. And what that looks like is picking up the pen and grabbing the paper and writing inventory. Oftentimes we hear, well, you got to let go and let God. And if you're like me, I don't know how you are asking me to do an intangible thing, and I need tangible directions. How do I let go, let God? Start by writing inventory. That's a good place to start. Good place to start. So, is it not, you can almost hear it. Is it not evident to the rest of the players that these are the things that I want? You know, you can kind of hear that. What about what I want? It's like, girl, tree number 3 is not about you. It's not about you. But these are the things that I want. And do not his actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can get out of the show? That's how I operate in self, and that's how I'm perceived and received by others. We're going to talk about, not this week, but probably next week, I step on your toes, and then you retaliate. And all I see is your retaliation. I cannot see that I stepped first. And that's what we get to in the 4th column of resentments. And it says, is he not even in his best moments a producer of confusion rather than harmony? And so what is this metaphor? This metaphor is that I'm tree number 3 and I'm trying to manage the show. I don't have the full script. I'm trying to manage the show, but man, I was told at a meeting a couple months ago, somebody was like, were you a theater kid? Because apparently I radiate theater kid energy, which I don't think they meant as a compliment, but I'll take it as one. I actually don't know what the little marks and the tape on the floor, what that means. I don't know lighting cues. You probably do not want Romeo and Juliet set to alternative polka. I don't know, and I don't have the full view. So what am I doing in step 3? Well, if you've ever been on stage, even as like a holiday pageant as a kid, you know what it's like when the lights are on you and the audience is in darkness. You can't really see. And so what we're going to trust is that in the audience, right at the center of the audience, the best seat in the house, there is a capital D director who has the full script, who knows the cues, who knows the marks, who knows the set design, who knows the makeup, who knows, the costuming, who knows the lights and the sounds and knows all of it. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to let the director be the director. I got some news. The director was the director the whole time. I just thought I was sitting in the director's chair. I wasn't. I was on a stool or something. And I'm going to let the director be the director. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow my lines. And what are my lines? Well, if you remember, I'm tree number 3, baby. I got to sway in the breeze. Sway in the breeze, those are my lines. And we talk about step 2, we talk about this idea. I can't see God. I can't see God. But it's a little like the wind. We don't, and I promise, if we go and we ask to see God, we look for God, man, you will see God in abundance of places. Going back to the airport is one of the places that God, the veil is so thin for me. I see God all over the airport. I also enjoy the dentist, so I'm just going to preface that I'm a bit of a weirdo. But I don't see God when I'm new, but we see the results of God. Just as I don't see the wind, but I see the results of the wind. And so what are my lines is to let God flow through me, to be an expression of God's love, to sway in the breeze. And how I do that and how I begin to do that is putting pen to paper on step 4. That's my lines. If I'm an alcoholic, what are your lines? Step 4, write some inventory, share it with somebody. Quiet hour, 6, 7, go out, make amends. Continue that process, deepen that relationship with God, and go help God's kids. That's my lines. That's what I'm asked to do. And don't you worry, God's got the set design, God's got the other actors, God's got all of it. I don't need to manage it. Also, I was doing a terrible job at managing it anyways. So it says our actor is self-centered, egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays. I want to point something out. I did not think I was self-centered when I got here. I know, shock. Because I assumed self-centered was like, I am amazing. I am the best person of all time. And I do not approach that hubris ever. That is not how I show up to life. How I show up to life on my own will is that I'm the biggest piece of garbage that ever lived. I don't deserve to take up space. I hate myself. I hate myself. I hate myself. I hate myself. But I want to point out that that is self-centered. Bear with me. I am centered upon self. I am centered upon my ego and what I think of me and what I think other people think of me, which I am going to assume is not good. That's my baseline, right? I'm still stuck in self. It says he is like the retired businessman who lolls in the Florida sunshine in the winter, complaining of the sad state of the nation. And so, we can come down to Boca Raton and hang out on those white sandy beaches. I assume white sandy beaches. I haven't been, but I believe it exists. See, I'm not gaslighting you about the state of Florida. Florida exists. What is it? A peninsula? Those aren't real. No, it exists. But imagine, like, Christy, you and I know we have had some winter. We have had some weather. And so being on the beach, the Florida sunshine, we can just imagine the ocean waves lapping that perfect sand. A palm tree or two and a beautiful breeze that's moving them and the sky and the sun, and it's perfect. And that retired businessman, he's not there. He's not there. He's not on the beach. He's not in the sunshine. He's in his own head about how the world is wrong and things are wrong and things aren't working out. I know nobody relates. I'm the sort of person you invite me to Disneyland and I will just ruin it with my mind. I'll show up to Disneyland and be suicidal. I know you guys can't relate to that. But that's how I am. By the way, with the power of God, you can go anywhere and be full of joy. I'm like, I want to go to Nebraska. I bet I'd have a great time. I'm the sort of person that's like, Des Moines sounds delightful. That's in Iowa. Alrighty. I gotta land this plane. Alrighty. And it says, the politicians and reformers who are sure all would be utopia, capital U, if the rest of the world would only behave. You know how the world's been a little divided a little bit lately? And if one side got their way, the other would be absolutely unhappy and vice versa. And do we not see that that is insane, that one person can come up with a way that would be, everyone will be happy, the world will be happy if I just get to run the show. We do not want me running the show. My life was bad enough. And it says, the outlaw safecracker who thinks society has wronged him. Now, I'm just going to posit an idea that perhaps, if he is not cracking safes, he is not under the lash of society wronging him for his illegal activities. I will also, you might be like, girl, you don't know his backstory. That's fair. But if you've ever gotten locked out of your house, you know how expensive it is to get a locksmith. That is some lucrative business. He could be using that for good, right? So, and it says, and the alcoholic who has lost all and is locked up. Oh, you know what I forgot to read? The minister who sighs over the sins of the 20th century. My brain skipped ahead of it. And I'll just talk about that real quickly. So the minister who is sighing over the defects of character that fulfill the congregation in the world, but can't do anything about his own. Does that sound familiar? I know you guys wouldn't come to an AA meeting and judge people based on their defects and struggle with your own. Not you guys, but I've been known to do it. And the alcoholic who has lost all and is locked up. Whatever our protestations, whatever our beliefs, are not most of us concerned with ourselves, our resentments, our self-pity? Am I not thinking about me? And so why don't we, that's a perfect place. We'll leave it there and I'll toss it over to Vivian.